The space station called Velar 7 floated in the darkness between stars. It was home to thousands of beings from many different worlds. Some had scales. Some had wings. Some were made of light and crystal. And some, like young Taiho, were human. Taiho was 34 years old. He had brown eyes, black hair that was always a little messy, and a face that smiled easily. He was not tall. He was not strong. By the standards of the galaxy, humans were considered weak and fragile. They lived short lives. Their bodies broke easily. Most species looked at humans the way humans might look at small insects, interesting, perhaps, but not important. But Taiho did not care what others thought. He had come to the space station 5 years ago, looking for work and adventure. He found both. Now he worked as a security guard in the Galactic Embassy Tower, a massive building that rose up through the center of the station. The tower held diplomatic quarters for over 40 different species. It was a place of politics and power, of ancient beings and strange customs. Taiho worked the night shift. He liked it. The corridors were quiet. The lights were dim. He could walk for hours, passing by doors that led to rooms filled with wonders he could barely imagine. Tonight, like every night, he reported for duty at midnight station time. He changed into his dark blue uniform in the locker room and clipped his badge to his chest. The badge had his name and a small symbol that marked him as human. Most species needed that symbol. They could not tell humans apart by looking at them. His partner for the night was Crixel, a Velari. The Velari were tall beings with silver skin and 4 arms. They had no hair, and their eyes were like polished mirrors. They were known throughout the galaxy for their intelligence and their logic. They felt no emotion, or so they claimed. Everything they did was based on calculation and reason. Crixel had been a security officer for 200 years. To him, Taiho was like a child young, inexperienced, and destined to die long before Crixel showed any signs of age. "Good evening, human Taiho," Crixel said, as Taiho entered the control room. The Velari was already seated at the main console, his 4 hands moving across different screens at the same time. "Evening, Crixel," Taiho replied. He sat down in the chair next to his partner and looked at the monitors. 12 floors of the tower were their responsibility tonight. 12 floors, each home to a different species. Floor 82 housed the crystalline beings made of living glass who communicated through light patterns. Floor 84 was home to the merchants of Keth, small furry creatures with 6 legs and a love for trade. Floor 86 belonged to the Velari diplomatic team. And Floor 87, the highest floor in their section, was the domain of the Drakari. Taiho always felt a small thrill when he looked at the monitors for Floor 87. The Drakari were dragons. Real dragons, like the ones from old Earth stories, except these were real, and they were older than human civilization. They had scales black as space and eyes that burned like fire. They could breathe flames hot enough to melt steel. They lived for thousands of years and remembered things that other species had long forgotten. The Drakari quarters were designed to handle fire. The walls were made of special stone that could not burn. The air was filtered to remove smoke. Drakari needed heat the way humans needed water. Their rooms were always warm, sometimes hot enough to make a human faint within seconds. Only one Drakari family lived on Floor 87 high elder Kenneth and her daughter Soreth. Kenneth was ancient, nearly 3,000 years old. She served as the Drakari ambassador to the Galactic Council. Soreth was young by dragon standards, only 90 years old, which made her roughly the equivalent of a human teenager. Taiho had never spoken to either of them. Dragons did not talk to security guards. But he had seen Soreth once, walking down a corridor with her mother. She was smaller than her mother, her scales not yet fully hardened, her fire not yet fully grown. She had looked at Taiho as she passed, and for a moment, he had seen curiosity in her golden eyes. Tonight, the monitor showed floor 87 as quiet. The temperature was normal for Drakari, about 300 degrees by human measurement. Nothing moved in the corridors outside their quarters. Taiho settled into his chair and prepared for another long, boring night. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Taiho made his rounds, walking through the dim corridors of floors 82 through 86. He nodded to the crystallines who never slept. He checked the locks on the trading halls of the Keth merchants. He waved to the Valari Knight staff who never waved back. Then he returned to the control room and took his place beside Crixel again. All quiet, he reported. As expected, Crixel said. The probability of incident during this shift is 0.0034%. Taiho smiled. Crixel always talked like that, in numbers and percentages. It used to annoy him. Now he found it almost comforting. He was thinking about getting a cup of coffee when the alarm screamed. The sound cut through the quiet like a knife. Red lights flashed across every screen. Crixel's 4 hands flew across the controls, pulling up data faster than Taiho could follow. Fire detected, the computer announced in its calm, mechanical voice. Floor 87, Drakari quarters. Temperature exceeding safe parameters. Taiho felt his heart begin to race. Fire? On the dragon floor? That does not make sense. Dragons cannot be hurt by fire. You are correct, Crixel said. His silver eyes were focused on the data streaming across his screens. Drakari are immune to normal fire. But this is not normal fire. He pulled up a thermal image of floor 87. Taiho stared at it, trying to understand what he was seeing. The entire floor was burning. But the flames were wrong. They were not orange or red like normal fire. They were white and violet, burning with an intensity that the computer could barely measure. Plasma charges, Crixel said. Someone has planted military-grade plasma charges throughout. Floor 87. The temperature is rising beyond anything the safety systems can handle. But the dragons. Even Drakari cannot survive this level of heat for long. The flames are burning at temperatures normally found only in the hearts of stars. Taiho felt cold despite the sweat forming on his forehead. High Elder Kemeth? Sorath? Crixel's hands moved again. The thermal image zoomed in, searching for life signs. High Elder Kemeth departed the station 6 hours ago for a council meeting on the homeworld. She was scheduled to return tomorrow. And Sorath? Crixel was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was strange, almost soft, for a Valari. One life sign detected, small, located in the nursery quarters. Heat signature is weakening. Sorath. The young dragon was alone, and she was dying. More alarms began to sound throughout the tower. Emergency teams were being summoned. But Taiho knew, with a terrible certainty, that they would be too late. The flames were spreading too fast. The temperature was rising too high. No one could reach floor 87 in time. No one except someone who was already close. Taiho looked at the monitors. He looked at the single fading life sign on the thermal image. He thought about a young dragon with curious eyes, trapped in flames that could kill even her kind. And slowly, without really deciding to, he stood up from his chair. The control room filled with people within minutes. Security officers from every floor rushed in, their faces showing fear and confusion. The alarm was still screaming. The red lights were still flashing. And on the monitors, floor 87 continued to burn. Ambassador Verith arrived with 2 Valari guards at his side. He was tall, even for his species, and his silver robes marked him as one of the highest-ranking diplomats on the station. His mirror eyes scanned the screens with cold calculation. "Report," he commanded. Crixel explained the situation quickly. "Plasma charges. Temperatures beyond safe limits. High Elder cometh away. Her daughter Solrith trapped inside. Vareth nodded slowly. Activate all fire suppression systems. Evacuate floors 85 and 88. Begin damage assessment. The suppression systems are already active, Crixel said. They are having no effect. The plasma burns too hot. We cannot put out these flames. Then contain them. Let the fire burn itself out. Taiho, who had been standing silently near the door, spoke up. What about Solrith? Vareth turned to look at him. The ambassador's expression did not change. Valari faces rarely showed emotion. The Drakari child is beyond rescue, Vareth said. The computer has calculated the probability of a successful rescue mission. The odds of reaching her and returning alive are 0.03%. That is effectively zero. Effectively zero is not zero. Vareth tilted his head slightly, as if Taiho was a puzzle he could not quite solve. Human Taiho, I understand your species has emotional attachments to the concept of rescue. But logic must guide our actions. We cannot waste additional lives on an impossible mission. So we just let her die? We accept the reality of the situation. High Elder Chemeth will be informed. Diplomatic condolences will be offered. Life will continue. Taiho felt something hot rise up in his chest. It was anger, and it surprised him with its strength. He had always been an easygoing person. He did not get angry easily. But something about the way Vareth spoke so calm, so cold, like Solrith was just a number on a screen, made him want to scream. He did not scream. Instead, he walked to the emergency locker at the back of the room and began pulling out equipment. The heat-resistant suit was bright, orange and bulky. It was designed for electrical fires and minor emergencies. It could protect a human for maybe 15 minutes in temperatures up to 500 degrees. Floor 87 was already above 1,000 degrees and rising, but it was the only protection available. Taiho began putting on the suit. Crixel's voice came from behind him. Human Taiho, what are you doing? What does it look like? It looks like you are preparing to die. Taiho paused with one arm in the suit. He turned to look at his partner. For the first time in the 2 years they had worked together, he thought he saw something in Crixel's mirror eyes. It might have been concern. It might have been confusion. With Valari, it was hard to tell. There is a child up there, Taiho said quietly. A scared kid, alone, burning to death. I cannot just stand here and watch it happen. The probability of success. I do not care about probability. Crixel was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, his voice strange and soft. I have worked with humans for 2 centuries. I have never understood your species. You make decisions that have no logical basis. You act against your own survival. It is fascinating. Is that your way of saying goodbye? It is my way of saying that I will remember you, human Taiho. That is not something I say to many beings. Taiho smiled, even though his heart was pounding with fear. Thanks, Crixel. That means a lot. He finished putting on the suit and picked up the helmet. It was scratched and old. The visor had a crack running across one corner. It was not designed for this. Nothing was designed for this. He was almost to the door when someone stepped into his path. Na Yunji was the communications officer on duty. She was human, 28 years old, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She was one of only 12 humans on the entire station, and she had never been particularly friendly to Taiho. They had worked together for 3 years and barely spoken beyond basic greetings. Now she stood in front of him, blocking his way, her face tight with something he could not read. Move, Taiho said. You are being stupid. Probably. Move. That suit will not protect you. You will be dead in 2 minutes. Maybe less. Then I have 2 minutes to save her. Yunji grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Listen to me, Taiho. I know you think you are being a hero, but you are not. You are just throwing your life away for a creature that is not even the same species as you. She is a child. She is a dragon. Her people live for thousands of years. They have powers we cannot imagine. And you know what? They do not care about us. To them, humans are like insects. We are beneath their notice. If the situation was reversed, if you were the one trapped in that fire, do you think any Drakari would risk their life to save you? Taiho looked at her. He saw the fear in her eyes, hidden beneath the anger. He understood, in that moment, that she was not trying to stop him out of cruelty. She was trying to stop him because she did not want to watch him die. But it did not change anything. Maybe not, he said quietly. Maybe no Drakari would save me. Maybe no Valari would. Maybe no one in this entire galaxy would risk their life for a human security guard. But that is not the point, Yunji. Then what is the point? The point is that I would. I would save anyone, human or dragon or crystal or anything else, because that is who I am. That is who we are supposed to be. And if I stand here and let that little girl die just because she is different from me, then I am not the person I want to be. Yunji stared at him. Her grip on his arm loosened. You are insane, she whispered. Maybe. He gently pulled his arm free. But I would rather be insane than be cold. He put on the helmet and sealed it. The world became muffled and strange, seen through the cracked visor. The suit was already growing warm from his own body heat. The elevator was just down the corridor. Floor 87 was only 3 floors up. It would take 30 seconds to get there. Then he would have however long the suit lasted 90 seconds. Maybe, probably less to find Sorath and get them both out. It was not enough time. He knew it was not enough time. He went anyway. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Taiho stepped inside and pressed the button for floor 87. The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. In the control room, everyone watched the monitors in silence. They watched the small dot that represented Taiho moving up through the building, getting closer and closer to the inferno that waited above. Ambassador Vareth shook his head slowly. Illogical, he said. Completely illogical. Crixel did not respond. He was watching the screens with all 4 of his hands still. For the first time in 200 years, he did not know what to calculate. Eung stood near the door, her arms wrapped around herself. She was thinking about what Taiho had said, about who we are supposed to be, about being sane rather than being cold. She did not understand. She was not sure anyone understood. But as she watched that small dot rise toward the flames, she felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. It was Hope. The elevator stopped at floor 87. The doors opened. And Taiho stepped into hell. The heat hit Taiho like a wall. Even through the suit, he could feel it pressing against him from all sides. The air itself seemed to be on fire. The corridor ahead of him was a tunnel of flame, burning with colors he had never seen before, violet and white and a strange gold that hurt to look at. His suit's temperature warning began to scream immediately. The display inside his helmet showed numbers climbing higher and higher. 600 degrees. 700. 800. The suit was designed for half that temperature at most. He had seconds, not minutes. Taiho forced himself to move. Each step was harder than the last. The floor was melting beneath his feet, turning soft and sticky. The walls were warping, bending inward like they were made of wax. Somewhere ahead, through the flames, he could see the shape of a door. The nursery. That was where Crixel had said the life sign was located. That was where Sorath was trapped. He pushed forward. The suit began to fail almost immediately. He felt the heat seeping through at his shoulders first, then his back, His skin began to burn. Not badly, not yet, but enough to make him gasp with pain. The door to the nursery was 20 meters ahead. Then 15. Then 10. The ceiling collapsed behind him. Taiho did not look back. There was no point. His exit was gone now. The only way was forward, and even forward was almost impossible. 5 meters. The heat was unbearable now. His lungs were burning with every breath. The air inside his helmet was growing hot enough to hurt. He reached the door. It was made of the same heat-resistant stone as the walls, but even it was cracking and glowing red. Taiho grabbed the handle and immediately felt pain shoot through his hand. The glove had melted. His palm was burning against superheated metal. He did not let go. He pulled the door open with a scream that no one could hear. The nursery was smaller than he expected. It was a circular room filled with soft things, cushions and blankets made of some material that could not burn. In the center of the room was a nest, built from what looked like black glass. And in the nest was Sorth. She was smaller than he remembered. Her scales, which should have been pure black, were cracked and gray. Her eyes, which should have burned like fire, were dim and fading. She was curled in a tight ball around something 3 objects that Taiho could not quite see. He stumbled toward her, his suit falling apart around him. Pieces of melted plastic dropped from his shoulders and arms. The visor of his helmet cracked further, letting in waves of impossible heat. "Sorth," he said. His voice was weak, barely a whisper through his damaged speaker. "I am here to help." The young dragon lifted her head slowly. She looked at him with confusion and fear. "Human?" she said. Her voice was like stones grinding together, but higher than adult dragons. "Younger. Why are you here?" "To get you out." "You cannot. The fire is too strong. You will die. Maybe." He was beside her now, kneeling next to the nest. Up close, he could see what she was protecting. 3 eggs. They were black like her scales, shot through with veins of gold. They were warm to the touch. He knew this because his glove was gone now, and he could feel them against his burned palm. "My siblings," Sorth whispered. "The last eggs of my mother's line. I cannot let them burn." Taiho understood then. She was not just trapped here. She had stayed here, choosing to die rather than abandon the eggs. Even now, even with her scales cracking and her fire fading, she was trying to protect them. She was just a child trying to save her family. "We are all getting out," Taiho said. "You, me, and the eggs. That is impossible." "I do not believe in impossible." He began to strip off what remained of his outer suit layer. The material was damaged but still intact in some places. He wrapped it around the eggs, carefully, creating a bundle that he could carry. The eggs were heavier than he expected, but he managed to lift them. "Can you walk?" he asked Sorth. I do not know. Try." She uncurled slowly. Her movements were stiff and painful. One of her wings was damaged, hanging at a wrong angle. But she got to her feet, all 4 of them, and stood beside Taiho on shaking legs. "There is no exit," she said. "The corridor collapsed behind you. I heard it. Then we find another way." He looked around the nursery. The walls were melting, but they were melting slowly. The floor was cracking. And in one corner, he saw something, a metal grate, built into the floor. "What is that?" he asked. "The maintenance shaft. It leads down to the lower floors. But it is too small for a Drakari to fit through. You are not a full-grown Drakari, and I am not a Drakari at all." Sorth stared at him. In her dim eyes, something flickered, something that might have been hope. "You truly believe we can escape?" "I believe we have to try." He moved to the grate and pulled it open. His hands were burned and bleeding now, the skin peeling away in strips. The pain was so intense that it had become almost abstract, like something happening to someone else. The shaft below was dark and filled with smoke, but it was cooler than the nursery. Not safe. Nothing was safe anymore, but better. "You first," Taiho said to Sorith. "I will hand you the eggs once you are through. I am afraid. I know. But you are also brave. You stayed here to protect your siblings when you could have run. That takes courage. I did not feel brave. I felt scared." Taiho smiled, though his lips were cracked and bleeding. That is what brave is. Doing the right thing even when you are scared. Sorith looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded and began to squeeze into the maintenance shaft. It was a tight fit. Her wings scraped against the sides, and she had to push hard to get through. But she made it. Taiho handed down the eggs one by one. Sorith caught them gently in her claws, cradling them against her chest. Then it was his turn. The shaft was narrow, much too narrow for comfort. Taiho had to push and pull himself through, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through his burned body. The metal scraped against his wounds. Blood made his grip slippery. Behind him, the nursery collapsed. He felt the heat surge as the floor gave way and the entire room fell into the inferno below. He kept climbing. The shaft went down and down, past floor 86, past floor 85. The temperature dropped slowly. The smoke began to thin. Somewhere above him, the fire was still raging, but down here, it could not reach. Finally, he saw a light ahead. Not fire real light. The shaft opened into a corridor on floor 85, where emergency teams were waiting. Sorith emerged first, still clutching the eggs. Taiho heard voices, Crixel's voice and Yunji's, and others he did not recognize, but he could not make out the words. His ears were ringing. His vision was blurring. He pulled himself out of the shaft and fell onto the floor of the corridor. Crixel caught him before he hit the ground. The Valari's forehands were surprisingly gentle as they lifted Taiho's broken body. "You made it," Crixel said. His voice was strange, soft, and warm, nothing like the cold logic Taiho was used to. "Against all probability, you made it." Taiho tried to speak, but no words came. His throat was too damaged. His lungs were too burned. Everything hurt. But he was alive. And so was Sorith. And so were the eggs. He had done it. As the medical team rushed toward him, as consciousness began to slip away, Taiho felt something he had not expected. Peace. He closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. The medical bay on Station Velar 7 was the most advanced healing center in 3 star systems. Doctors from a dozen species worked there, using technology that humans had not yet invented. They could regrow lost limbs. They could cure diseases that had no names. They could bring beings back from the very edge of death. Yun Taiho needed all of that and more. When they brought him in, the doctors were not sure he would survive the next hour. His suit had melted into his skin. Burns covered more than 70% of his body. His lungs were damaged from breathing superheated air. His hands, the hands that had carried 3 dragon eggs through an inferno, were so badly burned that the doctors could not separate his fingers. For 3 days, Taiho lay in a healing pod filled with medical liquid. Machines breathed for him. Drugs kept him unconscious. The doctors worked without stopping, fighting to save a life that had been burned nearly to nothing. On the 4th day, the chief medical officer of Valari named Derax called a meeting. "The human will survive," he announced. "But he will never be the same." The list of injuries was long. 3rd-degree burns across his entire body. Permanent damage to his lungs. His left hand would never work again. The nerves were too badly damaged. His right hand would have limited function. He would walk with pain for the rest of his life. His face would be scarred beyond recognition. "Can you fix these things?" Yunji asked. She had barely left the medical bay since Taiho arrived. She slept in a chair outside his room. She ate only when the nurses reminded her. Derek shook his head. With more time and resources, perhaps some of it. But human bodies are fragile. They do not heal the way other species do. Much of this damage is permanent. He knew, Yoonji whispered. He knew what would happen to him, and he went anyway. Yes, Derek agreed. That is what I do not understand. The human had full knowledge of the risks. The probability of survival was nearly zero. And yet he still chose to enter the fire. It defies logic. That is because it is not about logic. They turned to see Soreth standing in the doorway. The young dragon had healed quickly. Her scales were already returning to their proper black color, and her damaged wing had mended. She looked healthy and strong again, but her eyes were different. There was something in them now that had not been there before. Something soft and sad. I have been watching him, Soreth said, entering the room slowly. Her claws clicked against the metal floor. I have been sitting beside his healing pod, watching him breathe. And I have been trying to understand why he did what he did. And have you? Yoonji asked. Soreth was silent for a long moment. No, she admitted. I have not. Among my people, sacrifice is a calculation. We give something to get something in return. Trade. Exchange. Even when we protect our eggs, we do so because those eggs carry our future. It is logical. She looked toward the door that led to Taiho's room. But this human gave everything and asked for nothing. He did not know me. I was not his family. I was not his species. By every measure of logic, my life was worth less to him than his own. And yet he chose to save me. That is humanity, Yoonji said quietly. That is what we are. I do not understand it. But I want to. Soreth walked past them and entered Taiho's room. Through the window, they could see her standing beside his healing pod, her head bowed, her eyes fixed on his broken body. The days passed slowly. Taiho remained unconscious for 2 weeks. During that time, word of what he had done spread across the station. First, it was just rumor. A human security guard had entered the burning tower. Then it was confirmed news. The human had saved the Drakari heir. Then it became something more, a story that people told each other in corridors and dining halls. A human, a weak, fragile, short-lived human, had done what no one else dared to do. Different species reacted in different ways. The Valari were confused. They ran calculations trying to understand Taiho's decision. They built probability models. They created psychological profiles. None of it made sense. The mathematics simply did not work. The crystallines were curious. They came to the medical bay and stood outside Taiho's window, their light patterns flickering with questions they could not put into words. The merchants of Keth were impressed. Among their people, bravery was respected above all things. They sent gifts small, tokens of admiration that piled up in the corner of Taiho's room. And the Drakari, high. Elder Kemeth returned to the station on the 5th day. She came alone, without guards or attendants, and walked straight to the medical bay. When she saw her daughter standing beside a human's healing pod, she stopped. For a long time, the two dragons simply looked at each other. He saved you, Kemeth said finally. Her voice was deep and ancient, like thunder from a distant storm. Yes, mother. And the eggs? They are safe. They will hatch in 3 days. Kemeth nodded slowly. She walked past her daughter and stood before the healing pod. Inside, Taiho floated in the medical liquid, his body wrapped in bandages, tubes connecting him to machines that kept him alive. He is so small, Kemeth said. So fragile. I have seen humans before, but I have never truly looked at them. They are like sparks, brief and bright, and easily extinguished. He is brave, Sora said. he is foolish. Perhaps. But he is also brave. Kenneth turned to look at her daughter. Something passed between them, a communication that needed no words. "You have changed," Kenneth said. "I have learned something." "What?" Soreth looked back at Taiho's broken body. "I have learned that bravery is not about being strong. It is about choosing to act when you are weak." This human knew he could not survive. He went anyway, not because he did not fear death, but because he feared something else more. What could he fear more than death? Living with the knowledge that he did nothing, standing by while a child burned. Kenneth was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than before. "I have lived for 3,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched stars die. And in all that time, I have never understood humans. They are weak. They are brief. They should not matter." She reached out and touched the glass of the healing pod with one massive claw. "But this one matters, and I do not know why." On the 20th day, Taiho woke up. He opened his eyes and saw white ceiling tiles. He heard the soft beeping of machines. He felt pain constant, deep, everywhere, but also something else died. He was alive. A face appeared above him. Yoonji. Her eyes were red like she had been crying, but she was smiling. "Welcome back," she said. Taiho tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Yoonji brought him water and held the cup to his lips. "Soreth?" he whispered. "She is fine. The eggs hatched yesterday. 3 healthy hatchlings. She named one of them after you." Taiho closed his eyes. Tears ran down his scarred cheeks. "I did it," he said. "Yes," Yoonji replied softly. "You did." Taiho spent 3 months in the medical bay. There were surgeries more than he could count. There were skin grafts and nerve treatments and hours of painful therapy. Some days were better than others. Some days he wanted to give up, but he never did. Yoonji visited him every day. At first, she came out of guilt. She had tried to stop him, and part of her felt responsible for what happened. But as the weeks passed, guilt became something else. Friendship. Maybe more. She would sit beside his bed and read to him, or tell him stories about what was happening on the station, or simply hold his hand in silence. Soreth visited too. The young dragon came every afternoon, bringing her 3 hatchlings with her. They were tiny things, no bigger than human cats, with scales that shimmered in colors that had not yet settled. One of them, the one named after Taiho, was especially curious. It would climb onto Taiho's bed and curl up beside him, its small body warm against his side. "She likes you," Soreth said, watching the hatchling sleep. "She has good taste," Taiho replied with a weak smile. Slowly, day by day, Taiho got stronger. He learned to walk again, though he would always have a limp. He learned to use his right hand for basic tasks, though his fingers would never fully close. His left hand remained useless, a constant reminder of the price he had paid. His face was different now. The man who looked back at him from mirrors was a stranger covered in scars. One eye slightly damaged, his features changed by fire and surgery. He did not recognize himself. But when Soreth looked at him, she saw the same person. When Yoonji looked at him, she saw the same person. When Crixel looked at him, even the logical Velari saw something unchanged. The body was different. The soul was the same. After 4 months, Taiho was released from the medical bay. He moved back to his small quarters, though he could no longer work as a security guard. His injuries made that impossible. He did not know what he would do next. He did not know what purpose he could serve. That question was answered 1 week later, when a message arrived from the Drakari High Council. Young Taiho was invited to the Drakari homeworld. He would stand before the Council of Elders. He would be recognized for his actions. No human had ever received such an invitation. In fact, no being outside the Drakari species had stood before the council in over 500 years. It was an honor beyond measure. Taiho almost refused. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like a broken man who had done what anyone should have done. But Soreth convinced him to go. "You must," she said. "My people need to see you. They need to understand what you did and why. I am not sure I understand it myself. Then perhaps you will learn. We will learn together." The journey to the Drakari homeworld took 2 weeks. Taiho traveled on a Drakari ship, accompanied by Soreth and her hatchlings. Yunji came too. She had requested leave from her position, saying she wanted to see the dragon homeworld. But everyone knew the real reason. She did not want to be apart from Taiho. The Drakari homeworld was a planet of fire. Volcanoes dotted the landscape. Rivers of lava flowed through valleys of black stone. The air was thick with heat and the smell of sulfur. To Taiho it was beautiful. Dangerous and inhospitable to humans, but beautiful. The Council of Elders met in a great hall carved from the heart of a volcano. 12 ancient dragons sat in a circle around a central platform. Their scales were gray with age. Their eyes burned with thousands of years of memory. High Elder Kemeth sat at the head of the circle. Beside her was an empty space, the seat that would one day belong to Soreth. Taiho walked into the center of the circle. He was wearing a special suit that protected him from the heat, but he still felt small and fragile surrounded by so many ancient beings. He waited for them to speak. For a long time, there was only silence. The dragons studied him with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. They were trying to understand him, trying to see what made him different. Finally, Kemeth spoke. "Human," she said, "you stand before the Council of Elders. You are the first of your kind to receive this honor. Do you understand why you are here?" "I saved your daughter and her siblings," Taiho said. His voice was steady, though his heart was racing. "You did. And in doing so, you preserved the future of our bloodline. The eggs you carried are the last of my line. Without them, the house of Kemeth would end with me and Soreth." Kemeth leaned forward. "But that is not why we have brought you here. We could reward you with gold. We could give you lands on our world, protected from the heat. We could extend your lifespan using our ancient knowledge. I do not want those things. We know. That is what confuses us." Another elder spoke, an ancient dragon whose scales were so old they had turned white. "We have been discussing your actions since we learned of them. We have consulted our histories. We have meditated in the deep fires. And we still do not understand." The elder rose from his seat and moved closer to Taiho. "Tell us, human, why did you enter the burning tower? What did you hope to gain?" Taiho thought about the question. He had thought about it many times during his recovery. He still did not have a perfect answer. But he had something. "I did not think about gaining anything," he said slowly. "I saw a child in danger. I knew I could help. And so I helped. That is all. But you knew you would be hurt. You knew you might die. Yes. And that did not stop you?" "No." The elders looked at each other. Something passed between them, a communication that humans could not hear. Finally, Kemeth spoke again. "We have a word in our ancient language, Theraka. It has no translation in common. The closest meaning is a fire that burns for others, a flame that gives its heat to warm strangers. We thought the word was only a myth, a story we told our hatchlings. We did not believe such a thing could truly exist." She looked at Taiho with eyes that held thousands of years of wisdom. "You are Theraka, human Taiho. You are the fire that burns for others. And we will remember you." She turned to her daughter. "Soreth, come forward." Soreth walked into the circle and stood beside Taiho. Her hatchlings followed, clustering around his legs. "My daughter has made a vow," Chemeth announced. "She has sworn to remember this human for all of her days. When he is gone, for humans are brief, and she will outlive him by thousands of years, she will tell his story. And when she has hatchlings of her own, she will teach them. And they will teach their hatchlings. For as long as the House of Chemeth exists, the name Yun Taiho will be remembered." Soreth reached out and took Taiho's scarred hand in her clawed one. "And more than that," she said, her voice carrying through the great hall, "I have sworn that when humanity needs us, we will come. When they face fire, we will bring water. When they face darkness, we will bring light. When they are afraid and alone, we will stand beside them. This is my promise. This is my debt." The elders nodded, one by one. Something had changed in their ancient eyes. Something that might have been understanding. Taiho looked at the dragons surrounding him. He looked at Soreth, who had become his friend. He looked at the hatchlings playing at his feet. And he understood something too. He had not entered the burning tower to become a hero. He had not done it for glory or reward. He had done it because that was who he was. That was who humans were, at their best. They were the species that cared. They were the fire that burned for others. And now, across the galaxy, other species were beginning to see it. Not all at once, not completely, but slowly in whispers and stories, the tale of the human who walked into the fire was spreading. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak and short-lived were starting to wonder. Species that had ignored humans were starting to pay attention, because strength was not about muscles or scales or ancient power. Strength was about choosing to act when you did not have to, helping when there was nothing to gain, burning yourself to give others warmth. That was what humans did, and the galaxy was finally beginning to understand. Taiho smiled. His body was broken. His face was scarred. His hands would never fully heal. But standing in the heart of a volcano, surrounded by dragons, holding the clawed hand of a friend who would outlive him by thousands of years, he had never felt more whole. He was Theraka. He was the fire that burned for others. He was human.